I didn't scare her too much, Mike, I promise.
Just enough. You should be running towards it.
I was just gonna write the minutes.
Okay.
That's what I did yesterday. It helped me anyway. Session 1. Normally I print them out.
If you just want to bundle those,
Guten Morgen. What's that?
some of them are just the same presenter. But Eric,
Oh, yeah, I don't care about the presenter. I care about the time.
No, thank you, thank you. Sure.
3 minutes, really? We're gonna keep them
No,
for 3
actually, at
minutes?
1 a.m. if they started, like, and then as
so this is.
DAA is John Doe.
Oh, you have the wrong. You got the wrong one.
I just downloaded them from the data tracker. my
It's wrong.
friend.
Nancy, Lynn, do you need any help from me?
Kathleen, if you can help us with the note takers. So Giri and I Armstrong ditto to help. But as I believe we'll probably be getting into deep discussions, it would be great if you can make sure that we have
This is what it should
the
be.
items captured.
Yes, I'll have a problem the last 15 minutes, just because that's when I have to get my kid ready for school.
Okay. So,
Should have 3 from Eric to start off, and then basically 4 from Hank.
but the presentations and the times haven't changed, right?
They're just the order, so you don't have.
Ah, okay. I got you.
Yeah.
I was looking at the wrong one. Jara. Ah, I see. Said the blind man. Where's the- Oh, my goodness. You know what? No.
I can flip back and forth.
Yeah, that's true. I can,
Just if we do, well, I mean, I'm presenting it's harder, but
I can write them down. This is the only way I can keep track of, who's next in the queue.
If you're talking about the order of mine, I could have jumped back and forth. I can go in any order. It doesn't matter.
Well, given that we have a packed agenda and we're only allocating 3 minutes to some, I'm trying to keep everybody.
yeah.
Why, what are you waiting for? No, I don't know.
You're being serious?
No, I don't get. You know, sir.
We can get started.
I can get started. Okay, well, we're gonna get started. So, welcome to RAC's Working Group Session 1, and we're gonna go through a few of the chair slides to get started. So, just a reminder, in terms of the NoteWell information IETF policies on IP. So. This is a reminder that the IETF policies are in effect for various topics such as patents, code of conduct. It is meant to point you to the right direction. Exceptions may apply. The IETF's patent policy and definition of the IETF contribution and participation are set forth in BCP 79. That information is here on this slide and available. These slides are available on the data tracker. There's some meeting Tips for meeting today. If you're an in-person participant, make sure you sign into session using the MeetEcho data tracker. Also use MeetEcho to join the mic queue. Keep audio and video off if not using on-site version. And for those in the room, please keep your mask on for those who would like you to do that. Remote participants, make sure that your audio and video are off unless you're sharing or presenting during a session, and use of a headset is strongly recommended. The resources for this meeting are here and available on Data Tracker if you wanted to access those. And just a reminder for the code of conduct, extend respect and courtesy to your colleagues at all times, have impersonal discussion, devise solutions for the global internet that meet the needs of diverse technical and operational environments, and be prepared to contribute to the ongoing work of the group. Anything else?
Just quick agenda bash. So we're going to flash through this really fast. Hopefully everybody can hear us fine. If you can't, you can put it in the jabber, and we'll try and do better to get closer to the mic. So as you can see, and if you flip to the next slide, we have a very packed agenda for today. Hopefully you guys have seen this, because I don't know that we have a lot of time. We're already 1 minute over in our time slot to bash it. So I'm going to do a call once, twice, no changes. Let's go ahead and get started.
Oh, that's one change. That's
Too late. No, sorry. Go ahead, Hank. What's the change?
I think that I subtly changed the order of the agenda. I'm sorry for that, because the presentation blob is, I think, doing DAA after UCCS now. So that's just a minor thing, but I think the sequence is like off now.
If it's all in sort of a group, then
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can go in whatever order. Just
As long, yeah, because
make
it's
sure
all
that
the
I'm
same
presenting what
presenter.
it is you're talking to.
Yeah.
And I have everybody's slides. I think I have everybody's slides together, and so I could present for you if you like. That's what I'm trying
Well,
to say.
I think in the interest of time, we will be presenting the slides. You tell us how to flip them. So the only challenge would be if the order is changed.
Yeah,
You'll
if
just
the
flip
order's
back and forth.
changed from what was in the. So the first up is Eric.
Eric.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good morning,
All right,
Eric.
let's go. And good morning to you guys. I'm going to do an update on Chara, and as you can see, we're up to version 18. If you've been following the list, we've been going through the IESG. Next slide. And before I get into Chara, the details, just to remind you and review the set of relationships between documents. We have interaction models, R4C, network device attest. You'll hear that from Guy later, and the rest that you'll be hearing now. So there's a deep set of relationships between a lot of the drafts that are being progressed, and a number of them are at the ISG. Next slide. We are just about at a pass at the ISG. There are two discusses which I believe are minor and might also be closed at this point. We think we've answered all the comments that are there. So we need one more vote in order to close the document. Changes that have occurred during the ISG review include adding a appendix describing IMA, doing some reference changes, and doing some XPath syntax tweaks. I really don't think there's anything that's a blocker at this point. Next slide. And that's that one. So that'll help you get back on track right there. Any questions on Chara before I go to the next one? All right,
Nothing
next
from the
one.
room. Yep.
Event stream subscription, and this one will be even shorter, just to make sure we get through stuff. What event stream subscription is it takes Chara and the subscription work over in the NetConf working group to make sure that you can get a stream of TPM measurements off of a router or another device. And the goal here is to be able to not have to do challenge response, which is what Chara really talks about, but instead get a stream of information when the PCRs are changing in a TPM. And so the result is a verifiably fresh set of evidence flowing from one device to another. Next slide. Status, it's stable. There haven't been many comments, there have been some updates. We've been doing this mostly because as we close out Chara, we should be able to, after Chara is done with the IESG, to go ahead and write a socialize a security considerations document, and then go to working group last call. It really is not a big document. It should not be a controversial one, but since we have a dependency on Chara, we are sort of completing that work before going and requesting working group last call out of this group. And that's pretty much the update for this. Any questions on the subscription work?
None from the room.
Excellent. And last deck. And here's the R4C, and we'll keep on going. So next slide. It's broken into two parts. The first part is the information element definitions for attestation results that are generated by a verifier to support interactions, secure interactions between an attester and a relying party. And so the first part is really about claims, effectively, claims that are generated for secure interaction support between two devices. The second part is end-to-end implementation options, both via a background check model and what we call AR augmented evidence, which is a combination of a background check and a passport model. There are two implementations of this out there. Trusted Path Routing, which does things with a TPM, as well as Verizon, which is an open source project. And I haven't updated the slide because it actually has been adopted by the Confidential Compute Consortium so that you can make the interaction models with the information elements work in confidential compute type of deployments. And so this really is a general draft aimed at multiple types of attesters. Next slide. Now, there have been a number of changes since IETF 112. First thing is working group adoption, and thanks everybody for chiming in and providing comments. It was a good set of discussions on that. We've done a bit of text clarifications on the values of specific trustworthiness claims, and trustworthiness claims are types of attestation results, again, that are generated for the purpose of understanding the trustworthiness of one device for another. There's also been mailing list comparisons with the EAT security level and mailing list comparisons with the EAT software results. We'll have one slide on the software results, but again, we're just doing a quick update. Also, we've been aligning the Trusted Path Routing document. We have a new author there because of the additions from Meiling Ching from China Mobile. So we are continuing to percolate that draft, but we're not requesting working group adoption until we really get some market uptake. There are at least some people that are testing the service out, but there's no point in standardizing it until we have some more general adoption to make sure people are going to go and stay with the same type of deployment. Next slide. Now, a quick highlight on trustworthiness claims and trustworthiness claims. As I said before, this is an older slide, and I say it's based on the passport model. It's really a combination of the top half of the interaction model, which is a background check, with a passport model. And I highlighted from the slide verifier B. And this is because we've had some discussions on the mailing list about what's the difference between attestation results that are being sent from in the passport model effectively from a central place to, again, a relying party that also has a verifier on it. And so highlighting that there's a difference between attestation results and the new evidence, which is then sent off to a verifier B. And the last step here is very important because the relying party and verifier B is a multi-role that is got to be well understood as we define the information elements that are part of the AR augmented evidence. Next slide. Other thing that I'm going to pull out, and we're not going to read the text here, there are a number of design principles around the AR, and in this case, the AR for trustworthiness claims. And these are important as well for when you're designing attestation results. And these have been in the draft for about a year or so at this point. And it's very important to understand what you're trying to nail down as the rules that you're using to create AR. In this case, they're exposing a small number of claims, enumerating very explicit states, making sure that you have very explicit definitions that RP developers understand, and you support standard and non-standard extensibility. And as we go through the trustworthiness claims in future IETFs, making sure that these trustworthiness claim rules are hit makes things a lot easier for the implementer of the creation of the attestation results and their digestion by a policy language sitting in the relying party policy on the far end device on the right from the last slide. All right, and last slide. We're going to probably talk about this more later in the day here as we go ahead and talk about some of the items that Lawrence wants to do. This is a table that has undergone some discussion on the mailing list over the last few weeks, and that is the comparison of the intent and design of some of the trustworthiness claims for executables and file system, and some of the claims over in the EAT side with software results, which I think might be getting renamed. And while we dive into it, I wanted to highlight that there are certain things that we want to make sure that we handle when we look at the various specific objects that we're handling. For example, these things are: what is the target that's being evaluated? What are the number of encodable states, and how understandable are they? And how complex is the language for then having a policy on the target device? What is the purpose of the claim? What are the different encodings and serialization that is needed? So I don't think we have time to dive into this, but I want to keep this in the back pocket to understand that there really should be some commonality of the claim designs as we try to figure out what needs to be encoded for passing across the network, particularly when we are talking about writing some policy language on the relying party for interpreting what's going to be coming from the attestation results. And please chime in on the mailing list if you have any specific comments about these, but there is a lot of meat in this slide we don't have the time to digest, but I think it's important for your consideration. And I think that's all the slides I have at this point. I don't know if there's any questions on R4C.
No, but Eric, I want to go back since Roman put in the chat for the Chara draft.
Yes.
He noted that it would be good if you can get the discusses addressed before the turnover completes. So Roman, I don't know when that turnover completes. Anyway, because you have enough votes now to make it move forward, you just need to address them and rev the draft.
All right. As far as I know, the discusses have been covered. I just need the responses from people on.
Yeah, correct. So this is Roman jumping in since I got invoked. Yeah, Eric is exactly right. I'm in contact with kind of Rob to please ask him Rob Wilton to revisit his discuss, because I believe the edits that the team put out, thank you, Eric, do address the feedback, and the ballot turnover will happen on Wednesday at the plenary. So we're all pushing to get things cleared as fast as possible.
Excellent.
All right. So if anybody sees Rob in the hallway, grab him and take him to a computer.
Had I known, I'd saw him on Sunday, but I'll keep that in mind. Thanks, Eric.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Okay, up next is architecture.
Oh, that's me. Hi, I'm Henk. I have been told by the list to present my name. I'm Henk, and this is about the architecture. So Michael Richardson mostly did all of this content. So this is a report because we are in a good state. The tiny little letters on the right side are highlighting who is contributing in the last half year and longer, helping us getting this document done. There are some little star asterisks at some of the names. These are the editors of the document. So we have now no remaining issues, 185 in total. The Tuesday's meetings are in hiatus at the moment. And we have addressed literally all of the pull requests except the ones after my editorial cutoff. So we will not touch any content of the document until there will be a next action that might be, I don't know, actually. So next slide, which is what is happening next. That's the conclusion. So we have a div. You can look at it. We added a few things at the end. We upgraded the references. And our state is the very limbo state of being submitted to ISG, which can mean everything. I assume it's not dead. And so I don't know what's happening next now. So we will not edit anything at that document at the moment until we know what the further steps are. So that is my question to the room. What are we doing now?
So Roman, you can help me out. Now that it's an IESG publication, it does go up to the IESG. I expect to have reviews from the ADs. You'll get feedback.
That would be great. There has there's no issue, no doctors, no directorate, no area has done reviews yet. So that might be the next thing, I guess.
Well, so Roman, help me out here. Do you want me to trigger a directorate review? I mean,
I apologize. I was in the chat window. Are we talking about the RATS architecture document?
correct.
Got it. Yeah. So, right. So none of the pre-working group last call reviews were triggered. It's in pub rec for me behind a much larger document. I have it half open. So I would say just for expediency, give me the rest of the week. And I'm sorry, the rest of the week after IETF week. And I should have it because I think that my early review dropped all the comments I would have, and they largely appear resolved. I just need to double check, and then we can go to IETF last call and trigger the directorate reviews. So the action is with me.
So we are not in the final last call yet. We have had the last call, and now we initiate the next working group last call. Is that correct?
No.
It's
It's
the
an
publication has been requested.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
it's-
What I'm hearing was not matching what I was thinking it was on the slides.
No,
Okay.
he said IETF last call.
Oh, okay. I was sorry. Thank you. Okay, then that's it. That's basically what we're at. So as Roman said, the actions are now clear, and we can move on to the next item.
I'm shocked.
Interesting. That's the next item. Okay. So we have a DAA document in an adopted state that has happened due to the split from the reference interaction model document. DAA by itself seems to be its own thing that is worth discussing, having its own issue tracking, and I think that's fine. So now we recently convinced Dave Taylor to be a co-editor of this. And now we have a few next steps to be done. So I don't know how familiar you're with DAA. I think the timing is not enough for me to highlight all of this, but there's a DAA issue. It's about anonymity. So then you can't really distinguish one attester from another. So that's done by having a third party. It's a DAA issuer. And that might be very similar to a RATS endorser. And that has to be fleshed out. So there has been some comments on the list and some comments on the document itself. that we have a strong relationship here. We haven't addressed those yet. So that is the next step, one next step. Then we have the trusted computing group concept called the privacy CA. Privacy CA would also be literally in support of being a DAA issuer. So we haven't been talking about that in the text right now, but it's, I guess, the same function. So that has to be, again, elaborated on. And then we have the DICE concept, the composable identifiers from TCG that's using not a hardware root of trust, but the existence of a certificate. And if the certificate creation chain has been, is there, so if an existence of a root of trust certificate exists, so then you can imply that all the other certificates were fine. So there's a trust assumption of the trust chain in the DICE concept, and that again would have to be addressed and correlated to the DAA issuer flow. That's been done. So I think that's been done outside of IETF and the TCG. But again, the document doesn't talk about that. So these are the three items I think we want to do on a working group level next. I'm pretty sure that not everybody is super interested in all of these, but this is a group attestation thing. And there are a lot of identical things in, I don't know, cloud centers or IoT swarms that would really benefit from this. Because you don't really know that that exact thing was wrong, but maybe the concept of your whole swarm might be wrong. And so that's the attestation scope that we are targeting here for. And so that is our next steps. But I have to admit that we haven't prioritized that work at the moment. So that's just a status report. Any questions on that?
Can you get up and recognize yourself?
Sure.
Yeah, hi, this is Lawrence. I just wanted to understand, is it focused, I mean, DAA could apply to EAT as well as Chara. I don't know what your thinking is about that. I mean, so I just wanted to,
Yeah, I
to bring
understand
that
how
issue up.
it could apply, but I have no clue how it would.
Okay.
So if you have an idea how to map that, we are welcoming any input on that. I think that's great.
Yeah.
But that hasn't been done yet. So that we literally new work.
Right.
And it might even be another document. I'm not sure. But I think, yes, testing a group of, creating a trustworthiness assertions about a group of similar things that you don't want to be distinguished, I think is a real world application that a lot of people want. And if EAT can help us there, sure.
Yeah. Or maybe it's just, maybe it's COSE work also.
Yeah, okay. All EAT work somehow is cozy work, I think. So you might have split off some input there.
So Thomas Arjono is putting in the comments that DAA has been designed for the TPM, and the current draft would need more work if we wanted to look into privacy CA for DICE.
Yeah, that is exactly true. That is my point, because that hasn't been done yet. That's item 2.
That's precisely, this is Diego Lopez. That's precisely to understand this, because this is new to me, and I wanted to. So the goal is about, as you said, to not necessarily distinguish among many similar things that you don't care, or is about, because looking at the privacy CA, the first impression you get is that what you want is to protect privacy of the attester for whatever the reason.
Yeah, whatever the reason, exactly. Yeah.
But we're talking about many similar things. Privacy doesn't make any sense there. Just to understand what we're talking about.
So if I'm talking about, I want to say some cell phone, and all of these are kind of identical. And we're not talking about the SIM card thing, the individual part, but the rest of the composite device. And now you can do a group attestation for all the cell phones that are the same brand for a given scope. Let's say it's an enterprise.
Yeah, but this is, let's say, this is a case that is related with privacy because a cell phone is associated with a human that is moving around, etc.
Exactly, and that's why you have the DAA issuer. They give you a certificate that's not individual.
Okay,
it's a group thing.
Okay, so
that's it.
But it's applicable there, and on the other hand, it's applicable to I don't know, 1 million temperature or humidity sensors that we can spread.
Exactly,
here, which
the
is
devices
nothing to do with privacy. On the other hand,
exactly, the devices do not lose their individuality. They get issued something that can say, "But I'm of this group." That's basically the role of the issuer, and that's why it might also be an endorser, because endorser is very similar to that. So there's a bit of some discussion how to generalize it, for example, for EAT. Yeah.
Diego, would you mind restating, because Gidi missed your comment for the minutes?
In the minutes, yeah.
And if you can just go to the notes and update it, that would be great. Okay,
Lawrence, again, one
you
quick.
have to make it quick because we
Yeah,
need
yeah,
to move on.
that's fine. I just wanted to respond to Thomas. DAA, my understanding, is a general cryptographic concept. It's not bound to TPMs. For example, FIDO supports the DAA protocol in some ways, and there are a lot of flavors of DAA, and so it's a big, rich space, and it's not associated with TPMs solely.
So I'm not Thomas, so I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I would say yes, but the only specification existing are about TPMs.
No, FIDO.
Thank you. That is not wrong, but FIDO has no DICE extension because we are working on that right now in my institute, and I'm pretty sure about that, yes.
DAA is not touched on.
Okay, can we
Yeah.
take that to the mail list, please? And
We
I
can do
think,
that, but
I think what I'm
Excellent
hearing
questions.
is there's a distinction to the two use cases, TPM versus otherwise. So would be good to have the authors clarify it, as well as you, Lawrence, as to what your
Yeah,
intent is.
but I'm pretty
But-
sure there's no DICE extension in FIDO at the moment.
Please do that on the mail list. Okay.
Sure, we do that. So next slide, please. Interaction models, cool. So yeah, that's where we split the DAA stuff off, and we've already heard Eric talk about the background check model, about subscriptions and challenge response. So the Yang module is about challenge response. The subscription model is about apparently something else again, and then we have the time-based unidirectional models. These are general interaction models, how you convey evidence, and to some extent always could apply to attestation results because they inherit the freshness characteristics. So now the request challenge, the CHARA, the challenge request response attestation, and the subscription and the time-based ones are there, but in the architecture of RADS, we have defined the background check interaction model, which is a composition of interactions, and the passport model, which is again a composition of interactions. So these haven't been covered by the interaction models ID yet, but there's a project, a Linux Foundation project out there that's called C2PA. It's a coalition of content, provenance, and authenticity, and they want to implement all this. So they switched already to CBER and CDDA, and they really wanted to have we need a document to refer to these specific implementations, so the specific interaction combinations here for the models. So that's why we pulled that in to the document at the moment. And Eric, for example, also highlighted the AR augmented model, which is again a combination of the background check model and the passport model. So that's also something we could consider to put in here. We don't know where the demarcation line is, but I think we won't go anything beyond that. So, but that is what's happening right now. So C2PA was the reason to do the background check and passport model combinations in today. Now, please review that. But I think we are in a very good state. So we can also try to find out, are we good with that? Can we close the feature? Like, are we leaving alpha and now go to beta? So I think that's the point.
If you feel that the draft is mature enough, we can
Yeah.
do an early last call, and same thing, I can trigger
Yeah,
an early.
or some directorate or some other.
You weren't letting me finish. That's what I was going to say. I can trigger
Sure.
an early review.
I will let you finish now. Sorry.
Rhetorical. We can
Okay.
move on.
Move on. What's the next thing? Oh yeah, UCCS. So UCCS by name hasn't changed, but as Lawrence is probably well aware, we included now in the appendix of the USSID a option to accommodate both JSON and CBOR as a feature with CDDL. So there are two features in two capabilities of the CDDL expressiveness. One of them is called feature, and the other one is called a generic. So by selecting a feature, which is apparently CBOR or JSON, you can now switch to alternate generics that would allow you to use the JSON prelude or the CBOR prelude, and therefore would not create any conflicts with any CDDL definition whatsoever when you do a JSON and CBOR compliant CDDL spec. So Lawrence took note of that, and he already wanted to incorporate it. It actually does incorporate it in the spec because it also has a target of addressing JSON and CBOR. So we haven't changed the name yet. It's in the appendix. It's an informative thing. So now I think the next question for the working group is to understand, do we want this ID to be about UCCS and or also UJCS, I think it would be called then, right? So we didn't dare to do that just without consensus, but this is basically the call out to that we can start that discussion on the list. And if everybody want to have that, I think it's not specifically related to rats, but I think it's very important to highlight that any specification about something unprotected has to come with a very prescriptive threat model that tells you why it's okay to have these claim sets, be it in JSON or CBOR, unprotected. So what we're doing here is we're introducing the concept, and we always bundle it with at least the very first application scenario, and that's rats. So I think it's still very fine to have this in rats because we can't release the concept into the wild by saying, and then you have to do a threat model, and this is just how you do it, because then people will just do it that way and don't have to write down the security implication about why you're doing this and how this is done. I think that's a very important part of UCCS. And now, if it would become something that UJCS also, yeah, but it even gets more important. So that's why this is in rats. It's actually about CWTs, but you can't just do this with any CWT. They have to serve a purpose, like EAT, and then you have the threat model and the security consideration about that. That's what's happening in this ID. So that's why it's not in a CWT space. That's why it's in the red space. But in general, to be honest, the core of it can apply to any kind of CWT. I hope that makes sense to you. If not, maybe look at the draft and we can have a discussion on the list.
Okay, Gary just mentioned as an EAT editor, he's recommending decisions on UCCS be deferred after his presentation,
Yeah, I'm not
which was in session
thinking
2,
that
but
we are deciding anything in
yeah.
the next few days. So
That's what I was going to say. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't think we were deciding anything.
I'm just highlighting that this is why this is in rights. So, yeah.
Yep.
I think that's the last slide I think I have to present on. Yes.
Yes.
So Lawrence next, and bye-bye.
Hello, this is Lawrence. So that's the slide I've always presented, kind of the list of planned EAT claims.
Take the microphone because otherwise every time you turn your head around, you miss the audio.
All right, is that better? Yeah, okay.
Just take it out. Yeah, pick it up, put it out.
Ah, there we go. Oh, I'm not into that kind of. Never done karaoke. So.
You try it out now?
What? No.
Acapella.
The next slide, okay, please. So here's a kind of a status of the blue arrows of things that have changed in the -12 draft. So that's where work was done. And as you can see, most of everything is green, which means it's ready for last call. So the two areas that are still need some work, just in terms of the individual claims, are measurements and results, basically stuff related to attestation results, AR. Next slide. Here's just a list of interesting changes from the -12 draft. We definitely improvement in the language, mostly thanks to comments from Hannes. We added the hardware model claim, so now that there's this OEM ID, hardware model, and hardware version as identifiers for devices, that kind of a standard triple. Then there was the boot odometer claim was added, some privacy considerations. The hardware version claim was improved, and then the IANA section was filled in to some degree. The main purpose of the -12 draft was actually to get things published for early allocation, which that's I'm not going to talk about that today. I think that's just administrative at this point. Next slide. So here's a thing I wanted to highlight. Planning for the -13 draft is to group the claims they're all in just one big list now, put them into four. So one is claims about the entity. So these are the things we've been thinking about a lot in the past already. Then there's claims about the token itself. So these are things like the profile of the token, what the intended use of it is, what is expected to be in the token or not, and the timestamp. So you're kind of separating what are claims, kind of metadata about the token versus claims that are about the entity. And that was came to light partly in the AR discussion. And then nonce is kind of a special case because it kind of goes through. And then there's also some discussion about how to include public keys. And that's not exactly a claim. So there's a PR to rearrange the sections. That also has some good discussion about AR in it, that PR. Next. This is the work queue. One of the items is just to complete the CDDL and get it all to work. That JC generic is the one that Hank was referring to, and that's the ability to write CDDL that can be verified against JSON or verified against CBOR. That's an interesting thing. I mean, I think the CDDL tool is a little bit shaky on the JSON part. At least I've had some trouble with that. So there's some work that'll be in the -13 draft. Finishing that off. That JC generic actually is making the CDDL a lot simpler. So it's actually helpful. And I think we're on the edge here in terms of the use of CDDL, but I think it's a good direction. And then that rearranging the sections to group the claims better, I think that's a good one. That's basically straightforward work. Next slide. So here's topics that I think we need consensus on still. So there's some issue about the relationship between EAT and UCCS. And Giri is going to talk about that. I think the real core here is there a normative reference or not? And what's the sort of dependency and the ordering and in terms of last call process and stuff like that. We don't want EAT to get hung up by a hard dependency on UCCS. There's the security level claim. There's been a lot of discussion on that. I'm not saying that's a showstopper, but we got to figure out what we're going to do. And then there's the attestation results discussion. So, what's EAT's role in attestation results? Is attestation results a separate EAT profile? Is there a general result code? What's EAT's result relation to AR4SI? And I think there's a discussion later today for that. Next slide. Okay, that's it for me. Questions? Do we have time for questions?
No, you're a minute and a half over. We can save that for later if there's questions. Is it Guy or who's presenting on RIV? Guy or Eric?
Hi, Nancy. It's Guy.
Guy. Hey, Guy. You're up next.
How you doing?
Oh,
Thanks for.
I see him in the queue.
Hang on.
Hang on. Roman, were you in the queue? I didn't see you. There you go. Go ahead, Roman.
Wanted to announce the really great news if folks weren't watching the mailing list that the early allocation for EATs are now approved through kind of the normal kind of processes. So at this point, what we were waiting for is IATA to just perform their batch administrative action to get those claims posted.
Thanks to Michael for helping, Mike Jones.
Indeed. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, Nancy?
Mike Jones, of course. I think the discussion educated a lot of people, including myself, so I'm glad we had it.
No, and I appreciate you helping expedite it. All right, with that, sorry, Guy.
Okay.
You
Hi,
can go.
It's Guy Fedorko speaking on behalf of the um, remote integrity verification draft. Next, please. I think we're doing pretty well. Just as a reminder, the objective here is to standardize the way that you can use TPM-based devices to do remote attestation. That is to assess the integrity of the software and of the device that you're trying to validate. The point is to make this technology, which has been around for a while with TCG equipment, to make it into something that can be used by network operators with without requiring a proprietary work along the way to standardize the interfaces. Next, please. As a reminder, this is following the so-called background check model. That is, you go to the device and ask it how it's doing, and then the verifier looks at the results to produce a passport, if you will, to say that, to produce a result which says whether the device is working as intended. This does not include explicitly, RIV does not explicitly include the interaction with the relying party that we declared out of scope at the start, but is subject to the same discussions that we've been having about how you communicate between verifiers and relying parties. Next, please. I think the status is that the discussed comments, I think, have been resolved. There are a couple of other as I understand, non-blocking comments which require a resolution, but I don't think those are hard, and I think I can probably get them done even, perhaps today or tomorrow. And from there, I think we're on to the RFC editor, as I understand it. Next. Yeah. So again, the next step is simply to resolve the couple of comments that are still open. And I think that's all I need to say. The next slide is Eric's document chart. So we've seen that in the previous presentations. Are there any questions on this?
No, I appreciate your responsiveness in trying to get this draft done. It may be the first draft out of the RAPS working group. Woo!
Well, yeah.
Easy.
So we've been keeping it more or less synchronized with Chara as well. So I think they'll go together.
They're both going together. They're a package deal.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
All right. With that, next up is for us to have the discussion on the charter. There's been quite a lot of exchange on the mail list. As the chairs, we believe that, I don't know, it may be worthwhile for you to share the charter text if you can. So we started we started the discussion a while back, but back in IETF 112, there was agreement that there was some new work that needed to be done that wasn't in the charter. We needed to expand the charter. There was some proposed text. We did a call for interest to see if there was interest by the participants in this working group, if they wanted to extend the charter and if they liked the proposed text. And so there was a lot of discussion that went on in the mail list. And so we wanted to do the pulse again here. I'm trying to talk as much while Ned brings up the text, to see if there were any other remaining issues vis-a-vis the revised text for us to recharter the group. So let's see. This is a hybrid. So how do I do this? Poll, show of hands, do both.
If everybody's logged in.
Is everybody logged in here who's on site?
Oh, yes, so that I am.
Yes? Okay.
No, not everybody.
Not everybody.
No. I'm
Not everybody is.
he's so literal.
Because they are, otherwise they are not.
Okay, why don't I? You are or you're not? Okay. Let me do it the other way. Is anybody not? Okay. So I'll take your poll literally. So I want to have a show of hands of who has read the proposed charter text. Of course, I'm the one typing this on GitHub. And Ned is showing the charter text. Oh,
So this is
Roman-
Roman, that's the old chart text. That's what we already have. That's the existing scope.
yeah, the one on GitHub. That's the proposed new charter text.
That would have been interesting if people have checked now that
Yeah, well,
that was a test.
this is a test. Who is awake? Okay, I did start the poll. So raise your hands if you have read the proposed charter text that's on GitHub. And Ned will bring it up and we can have Ned read the proposed charter text as well. So we do have quite a few, and there was only one in the room who was not on the Meet Echo. So Hannes, not to put you.
Everybody in the room on Meet Echo and raising their hand. Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's surprising. Because
Otherwise, I'm going to call you out.
That's unreachable. Can I put that? Yes.
You can't find it.
I'm digging for it. Sorry.
It's GitHub. You want me to?
So
give
this is
it
the
to you?
document clarifying. So if you are using the small light version, you can vote from there, or you can use the full Meet Echo version. Either one works. So Hannes, even
Ah.
when you have tried to get into with the QR code, you can vote still.
Thank you, Ditto. Here's the link if you want to see it.
I think this is it, right?
Yes. Okay, most of you have not read the charter text. So Ned will be bringing it up. You can't do it?
Oh,
Of course, I'm running the poll,
you're
so
reading the
I don't
poll.
know.
Right, yeah.
I think the pause included.
Yeah, I will conclude the poll.
Yeah, that's good enough.
It's trying to involve me in the poll. Come on.
What's that?
Charter.
So we had 24 participants say they had not read the text. Only 8 had read the proposed text.
Okay.
Are you sharing it?
I'm sharing it.
Okay. You want to read through it?
A little bit of a character size increase, font size. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the main change to the charter was to expand the program of work to include endorsements and reference value, endorsers and reference value providers. So that text was added to item 6 in the program of work, which is standardize interoperable data formats to securely declare and convey endorsements and reference values. There was some other minor cleanup of the terms in the program of work, but no substantive change to the original intent of the other program of work items.
We updated the goals saying, you know, since we now have an architecture draft, we updated some of that text, but the substantive change is to add the program of work. Again, just to reiterate, adding to our charter, standardizing the data formats for securely declaring the endorsements and reference values. Comments. We are now open for comments and feedback.
So just yeah, that's actually a comment. So there's some asymmetry on the protocol work for the REDS charter at the moment. I'm not a super fan of that, but I understand why it exists. So the charter allows for new protocols to be specified in the working group when it comes about to the conveyance of evidence from the attester to the verifier. And it is talking only about reusing existing things when it comes to conveying attestation results from the verifier to the relying party. I'm okay with that. There is enough text in the charter that says, sure, that will work. And I don't think we need new protocols there. I just want to say that protocols that can convey evidence from an attester to a verifier could, in theory, also be used for that. So they are not literally invented for that, as said by the charter, but they're invented for the other thing. So this is like a weird loophole how you could invent new protocols for the other thing.
So you recall 5 was there to begin with.
Yeah, I understand that.
And the discussion was that we needed the data schemas.
Okay, and I also understand that. Yes.
Okay.
I just want to say that that for example, TUDA is a protocol for attester to verifier, and if that is getting standardized, it's a protocol, and then you can apply it to the other thing. So the asymmetry in the text does not really matter, because if you did the one thing, you can do it for the other thing. It becomes symmetric. So the asymmetric text in the charter does not serve a purpose, I think. But again, I don't mind that, because as I just said, it doesn't matter. So that's my only concern on the asymmetry on protocol design.
Yeah. Okay. On the queue, we've got Kathleen and then Dave.
Hi, so for the first item, and sorry I didn't get this to the list, what's the gating function for a document on extensions? And the reason I'm asking is because you'll have cases where you have to register things into registries, and some might require a document, you know, into COSI and in JOTS. Sorry, I'm still really tired.
You're
So I would
direct-
assume that's the gating function, right? So that might be the case where we publish if a claim has to be registered and requires a document, a specification required.
Yeah, I think that's what 6 is going towards, Kathleen. That we would have a document for that format. Is that what you're trying to ask? And are you asking as a chair to the group?
Yeah, so I guess it doesn't read clearly to me that I didn't see the connection. So you mean strictly use cases, but use cases without a definition or an extension? Okay.
Yes.
That was the intent. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, it wasn't entirely clear.
Okay. Dave Thaler, you're in the queue.
Checking audio. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So I got in the queue. I was going to say something very similar to what Hank said. And I think what Ira just put into the chat. I think it would be useful to clarify point 5. Yes, it was in there before, but we kind of have an agreement that says we much prefer existing protocols where they exist. And so I guess my original thought that I put in the chat was maybe it should be standardized use of interoperable protocols, but maybe even better would be to say specifically that the group will try to reuse existing protocols whenever possible. Right now, it's more open-ended that people can propose alternate protocols even if there's already a standard one that exists. And just being more explicit in the charter, I think would be useful to say really the burden is on somebody proposing a protocol to say, why would you not be able to use an existing one, right? And so I'm just suggesting some wording that does not preclude necessarily new protocols, but at least raises the burden of proof for those proposing it to say, okay, you can do one, but you got to be able to say why existing ones can't be used in that situation. So thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Hank?
So yeah, hi, this is Hank. Dave, do you think that would put me in any position to again argue why TUDA has a valid point? If so, I would not like to do that. But if you think it's obvious that TUDA is its standalone thing because it does things differently, I don't have a problem with it. And just as an individual, because I don't like more work.
I can't remember to what extent that would classify TUDA as a protocol per se, but I'm taking you do. I'd have to go back and read it again. I guess my point is that there's a couple of different legs in the architecture document, like a protocol between a tester and a relying party. And then there are protocols between, say, a verifier and one of the other two. And protocols between the attester and the relying party might be pre-existing that you're adding attestation to. And so the goal is to, whenever possible, put attestation into existing protocols that do authentication right now. But your legs that go off to, an endorser or a reference value provider or a verifier, maybe you need new ones that might be using, HTTP or something else as a transport, and those might be okay. But trying to reuse, say, attester relying party protocols for the horizontal leg in the diagrams, I think it should be a strong bias there. And so, but there could be layering things on top. And so I don't have a specific answer to your question, Hank.
Okay. So just as I said, additional comment to what you just said is I don't know what a tester would rely to convey to a relying party at all. So I'm confused.
Well, for example, in the passport model, it's conveying attestation results, right? In the background check, it's conveying opaquely evidence in the background check. Of course, neither of it's just using it as a transport, right? It's putting evidence over the top of whatever that protocol is. Not that the relying party knows that it's evidence, right? It's just an opaque blob that it has to pass off to verify.
I think
I'm
in
okay.
Background check case. Yeah.
I think both of you are oscillating, but agreeing on the need for us to use the existing protocols. Just with clarification.
Well, in particular, to put text into point 5.
Yes.
With the exception of the TUDA thing that I'm targeting for. So if this is in scope, fine. If somebody assesses this what excluded, I'm not fine. That's very obvious. So that's all my.
Okay. All right. So Peng Ling, you're in the queue.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, my question about the number 5 is that what layer the protocol will be used. In transport layer, I think the TLS will be a very good example to use the protocol.
I don't know that we've made that explicit.
I mean that if it's a transport layer, I think TLS will be a good example to use in this scenario.
Yeah. So we made that explicit, as we said, profiling existing protocols, example, DTLS, CoAP, or MUD, which is a lot of layers.
Okay.
So I think we've set some examples in the charter text.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't think we called them out explicit, but
We did.
yes, we. Oh, we did.
Okay.
Yes,
I
examples.
stand corrected. We did.
Hi, this is Hannes. What I hear is, and I haven't followed that discussion is previously, is you guys want to restrict what is being standardized. On the other hand, everyone who has a specific favorite protocol wants to make sure that the text covers what they have in mind, which is kind of odd. You essentially want to, like, it feels like you should table this and just continue, start the work, because otherwise everyone will anyway, as always, people will do what they want to do, and they will then just change the way that, or reinterpret the chart in a way that it fits their needs.
Well, and that gets to the question of existing protocols, right? If we could, not to be pessimistic, but if we continue to delay, there'll be maybe a new protocol, and then we'll say, hey, we should be using that one. All I'm saying is it's subject to interpretation, right? But again, what I'm trying to come back to was, if you recall, when we went to charter RATs in the beginning, we struggled to get the program of work lined up and agree on the text, which landed us on those first 5. The discussions in the last few months have been the notion of how do we do the conveyance of other information, and admittedly, to get us to move along faster, we added that number 6. Narrowing the scope to number 5, or I would say tightening the language, I think is fine. We have put, so I've asked Ned to update what's in the GitHub right now. And so we parenthetically just added, you know, the note, and the intent is to use existing protocols where possible. So what's interesting was we took a poll on the mail list, and there were no dissenting. There was discussion by Lawrence, I believe, right? And I believe we tried to do some of the wordsmithing on the GitHub. I'm thinking we probably need to do another poll and confirmation on the mail list, given that we've updated. We just updated the text on the proposed charter. Did I just run us out of time? Oh, we have 1 minute left.
Yeah.
Lawrence, it looked like you had a comment? No?
I'll make one comment. Yeah, this is Lawrence. Most of my comments were around whether or not EAT was going to be discouraged as an attestation results protocol, because there seemed a lot of consensus around that. And I was hoping for a little bit of an adjustment in the wording to be clear that we're not excluding EAT as attestation results, and that we have an expansive, or basically we have an expansive view of attestation results, not a narrow one. So that was my main concern. If I look around at the architecture, the charter, other things, I mean, it's not as strong as I'd like, but it's reasonable.
We do best effort so that we can get the actual work moving forward. I don't think we would be precluding anything, Lawrence, there.
Yeah, I think so too. This is Hank.
Yeah.
I think there's also another discussion item, and exactly that the next session, if I'm not mistaken, about the attestation result scope and such. So that would tie into that. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I will postpone that content discussion, and then we can bring it up at the next session. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, can I just get a show of hand? I mean, we're gonna shoot. I have to do another poll. Well, we're out of time, so why don't I just go back to the
milestones discussion.
yeah. Well, I mean, we're gonna have to confirm things on the mail list anyway. So, please, I'm strongly requesting that you guys read through the proposed text. I will do another call for support for the rechartering of this text. And we'll go from there on the mail list. Okay? Reasonable? Okay. Next up, I believe we're going through milestones. Can you put those up? So I'll fall on this one. We've been remiss. We have actually been updating the milestones. We are behind. We need to make sure that we can tighten the scope of some of the work that we're doing just so that we can move them forward towards publication. If there's more work to be done, I don't think we are excluding new drafts to come in. But we wanted to review this. And so part of the discussion.
There's some updates that are in direct review.
Oh yeah, Roman just updated it. Can you share?
Yep.
So we wanted to go through the milestones also to get an idea for new added ones, but given that we're not adopting new charter text, we'll hold off on the new ones. Roman, you're in the queue. Thanks, Ditto.
Hi. Yes, I want to just kind of continue on with the discussion that you're narrating about what's in the milestones. I will say I saw there were some pending milestones. I approved some of them. I did not release kind of some of them. So that's why you may notice that things are in a halfway state based on the edits we're making. And I think it's all informed by this charter conversation. My meta feedback would be, as we're thinking about milestones, is first, of course, we'll need milestones for the recharter activity, but I would really caution the working group to make sure that we're pipelining the work correctly, that we actually, in fact, have enough energy to kick off and start everything. I don't want to say at the same time, but we can finish kind of all the work, and we're not in a situation where we fan out, we start a lot of things, and we lumber slowly toward completion. So if the working group would want to think about waves or sprints of related work we want to work on, this first, then another kind of tranche of work, that may make things a little bit more productive. But I leave it to the initial proposals to figure that out.
I like that idea. Thanks, Roman. Okay, so I don't know that there's going to be much to discuss on the milestones, but we just wanted to show you that we are, I can't read. You want to go through them?
I can go through them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in most cases, we had work progress without updating the milestones. So the recent flurry of activity is essentially to go back and provide milestones that reflect the actual status of the various drafts. And so several of those that are currently in area direct review are fit into that bucket. And then there were a couple of milestones that were submitted that were in anticipation of the change to the working group charter. So those are, I think those are in your queue, Roman.
They're pending. Yeah. Any comments or feedback? Nope. I don't see anybody on the queue. So I guess we can continue to move forward. What's next? Taxonomy?
EAT, attestation, and results taxonomy.
So how long do I have for this? I was a little.
You asked for 30 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Well, I mean, if the chairs were nice, we can give you more than 30 minutes.
Oh, oh,
Yeah.
oh, the chairs were already nice for giving me 30 minutes. So thank you for that.
I'm often accused of not being that nice, so that's why it's like this.
So you won't give it to him because.
Sharing the right thing.
No, this is to say we'd allocated 30 minutes,
Okay.
but we gave some time back because the charter and milestones went quicker than we thought.
Okay. I don't have 30 minutes of slides or 30 minutes of talking to do myself. That's for sure. Mostly, I wanted to have some good discussion about attestation results and kind of some of the framing around attestation results, what we're trying to achieve here. So I just have a few slides to kind of introduce some things, and then I just like facilitate some discussion to try to back and forth. It seemed like it was a little, difficult. Some ways on the mailing list, I would try some of this. So next slide. So one of the things I really a point that seems really important to me is that attestation results are for a full range of security strengths. So that ranges from a piece of hardware that is designed, it's not a TPM, it's designed just to provide authenticated, attested device identity, maybe all the way to the RP. So no measurements, no software. So there's no TPM. So I think that's a use case, and I think we want to be accommodating that use case in both evidence and results. Another use case is simple uncertified software. So attestation is built into an Android app, like a FIDO implementation inside an Android app. So it's all software. There's no TPM. There's not much really going on to measure. It can't really measure itself. So, but it is a form of attestation, right? We see implementations like that, FIDO. So, and then there's everything between, which is kind of where we're spending a lot of our time, on things like TPM and TEEs, with attestation in there. And that is, I think that's the right place to be spending a lot of time, but we can't focus just on that. Next slide. So system architectures. So I think we need to think about attestation results for a full set of system architectures. So again, purpose-built hardware that just does attestation. There's no software in it at all. It's not a TPM. Again, app-based. So the attestation is implemented in Java or Swift or Python or something like that. So no measurements, just some simple attestation. And then everything in between. So I'd actually, I think back in August, there was a discussion on the list about adding 0.5 to the principles for AR4SI, and they basically said all that. But and I think there was agreement on the list to add this as a principle, these two things as a principle for AR4SI, but I don't think it actually got incorporated. Okay, so that's so I do think when you are incorporating all of this, it does change how you think about AR. Next.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is Hank. Attestation results are intrinsically tied to evidence. Is that correct?
Well, that's a very general statement, and I don't really quite know where you're going with that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a trap. Okay. So, so if evidence becomes stale, attestation results become stale. They come somehow ghostly entangled, right? You don't know, apparently, because the technology around that, that an attestation result is stale depends on the somehow knowing that the evidence becomes stale, but now evidence is not known to you mostly. So that's in general the challenge of rats. So now you're saying that everything that produces evidence can relate to attestation results. And now what I would like to highlight is that the attesting environments in attesters create evidence. That's the first. And then that the attesting environments can't just be signing fools. I think that's obvious.
Right, yeah.
But if you say everything can be an attesting environment by saying everything is an attester, it can be a signing fool. I think that's a contradiction. So how do you make sure that whatever creates the evidence in the attester, and I think it's always, of course, the attesting environment, is not a signing fool?
I mean, my answer is,
Wait,
So-
hold on. We've got Eric on the queue as well.
Maybe Lawrence.
can I answer that?
Yeah.
Or-
No, I just saw Hannes coming up. I wanted to
Oh,
make sure
okay.
Hannes knew.
So I'm when I say go back to if you go back a slide, please. When I say system architectures and security levels, I didn't say that these were assigning fools or attesting fools. I just said you can implement them in all these different ways. This is just implementation. And sorting out who's the fool and who's not the fool, that's really the job of the verifier, right? And so and I mean, you could be a verifying fool too, but but assuming we don't have verifying fools, it's the job of the verifier to say what it is. And they may say, like, okay, this attestation came from a Python, on a something or other, and it's not very good. And then you can use it if you want, but it's not very good. And so that's what I'd say. All right. Okay. Thank you. Hank says thumbs up.
Okay,
Adding
Eric.
adding one thing to the discussion that relates to the previous discussion. It's important to remember that you can sign stuff and be sending it to a relying party, the physical device, and that's okay. Dave Taylor really did a good job of educating our 4Z people that the relying party also has a verifier. In most cases, because it has to interpret the evidence as well on the passport model as something that was evaluated before. So just because something's sent to a relying party does not make it attestation results. It has to be evidence that's evaluated to become attestation results. And so we really have to remember that split role where the verifier, if it does do some kind of AI type lookup or other types of functions on the evidence, that just because it's received by the relying party device does not make it attestation results.
Yeah, maybe let's go for some more discussion. I'm not sure I agree with that one, but honest.
Of course, it's not even really something to discuss because it's base architecture that the relying party and the verifier are often co-resident in the passport model. So I don't even think it's something that can be discussed unless you want to argue the architecture.
Hi, this is Hannes. I think both Eric and Hank responded to the slide in a way that was completely unrelated to what's on the slide. So which is which with great points, but in my discussions, which are unrelated to rats with various people, there's always an attempt to make a judgment about the security of a system that they are describing. And interestingly, it shows up actually very nicely in these different categories. And there is often for many people, like, there's an assumption on what they consider the threshold to be, what the minimum bar is. And of course, there are some preferences and biases that go along with it. And I think I hear you, Lauren, saying that you have these different models, but you're not trying to make a judgment of whether that's good or not.
Right.
And I think that's probably the right way, sort of like leave that policy decision out there and let someone decide, but be aware that there is obviously a spectrum, and those deploying the solution need to make a decision about what they consider useful and which one not. And I think it also then boils down to, in context of RAD, not just about like judging the overall results, but actually individual values inside of a claim as well. So, for example, you take a security level claim, sort of a life cycle state claim. So typically, if you have some hardware IP in there, there's a life cycle state associated with it. But if it's in certain states, any information, for example, if it's in a debug state, you can have a perfectly secure solution, but you can then switch it into a debug state, different forms of debug state. If it's in a certain level, you cannot really make any useful judgment about the data you get when it's in that debug state, because you could modify any of the values then. And obviously, someone needs to be mindful about those aspects. And in practice, that will be a challenge, I could imagine, in deployments. So I don't know if you, Lawrence, if you plan to document these different levels. And of course, for example, I wouldn't go there, to be honest, because it's very difficult. Many people tried. And it's part of certification schemes, because they try to define different security levels and then match that up with ways to verify it and to demonstrate that I'm actually meeting that security level. What I'm trying to get with this is it's difficult even for us technical people to really talk about this without a lot of emotions, because we have our own preference on where we put the bar on. Like, I personally, I'm not too happy about the level 2 part, and I have a different perspective on level 1, of course, but I'm sure everyone in the room is different. So I don't know how you best want to convey that so that people in future discussions who are not part of the group or IETF in general will then not stumble over the same issue.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to a couple of things there. Okay. And then the next in the queue. So I spent a lot of years, started out as a software guy, and then I got a job doing some hardware. And it really opened my eyes about like what's going on in terms of hardware. I mean, to me, hardware was just a CPU you just ran stuff on. Then I started understanding what's really going on in the hardware and how variable it is and how you attack hardware and all sorts of stuff like that. Then I spent a couple of years designing certification levels for FIDO. And that really deepened my knowledge, understanding common criteria and how people, actually evaluate hardware security. So, I mean, 15 years ago, I would have been like, I don't really understand this hardware stuff. And it's just like, we just need to do a good job. Now I see security as a huge sliding scale from a whole bunch of, over a whole range. And my main point here, the thing I'm really after, is that we can't narrow in on one security level in RATS. We should not do that. All the protocols, I mean, if you want to design a specific protocol for a thing, then that's fine. Design it and call it out as this is just for this security level, or just it's not a universal solution. But RATS should be designing for universal security, any core protocol. So EAT is definitely that way. EAT definitely thinks about the whole range of security from the weakest to the strongest, and you don't have to use it for all of those things. It's just, that's what we're trying to accommodate.
Can I just put a pause on that? Just,
Yeah.
Having been a systems architect for a long time, trying to suit everybody, you're never going to be able to please everybody and every design. So I think as a goal, that's laudable, right? But I think some of the work that you've seen have been very specific to some hardware platforms or architectures, and we made sure that, and I'm speaking to the Chara one, which is more TPM specific as an example.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
I mean, I know it's hard. I don't think we should just give up because we can't, on the get-go. I mean, I think EAT is doing okay at this full range. So I think there's some possibility there. And I just want to, and we were recognizing Chara as TPM specific. The real question for me is where does AR4SI fit in this? Is it universal for all the levels, or is it narrow to a specific one?
I want to comment on Hannes' statement that you should somebody that decide if this is good or not. That's a literal quote you just said, right? Coming from the target of variation, that is the attester. So you should let someone that decide if it's good or bad. That's what you said, right? That's a verifier. That's a policy on there. Right. So it's defined who and what and when will decide this in the architecture. I think that's very important to sound, because when you said it was like some miracle occurs, but no, the architecture really decides this, and the verifier decides this, and that's why this is defined to attestation results. And I think this is to be discussed right here, right now.
So, this is Hannes again. So the architecture is a very abstract thing. Of course, in the end, it's people need to decide. That's what I'm trying to get to. Like, people need to make some decisions on what they find acceptable and what's not. Whether those are the people later who deploy the technology is different from us here, standards people, deciding that only the lowest one, the level 3 or whatever you call it, is the one we want to focus on, or we want to focus only on a DPM slash
I
let's say
don't
trust
know.
zone. I
Yeah.
think we could do that too, and some organization did that. But I'm there more with Lawrence saying that support a wider spectrum, because needless to say, like you guys talk a lot about DPMs because that's what you use. I would want to have my our stuff included as well, and probably Dara wants yet something else. And so being
Okay,
cognizant
well-
of there is just here for the warm
Don't
room,
point me,
but
yeah.
you,
So-
you get the point.
I understand your point, and I'm going back through the charter. I don't think the charter has precluded that.
Right.
Yes.
It's not clear to me that the architecture has precluded that
It has
either,
not.
Hannes.
Yes, it
right?
hasn't. But
So
I-
I'm just trying to understand and frame the discussion, right? Because, and I'm not saying it's a bad discussion. I'm trying to understand the goal, because now you pointed to a specific draft. And so if you're pointing to a specific draft, perhaps, and sorry, I'm just very target fixated of, is it that you're asking that draft to be more precise in its scope of where it lies? Or are you just objecting in its approach?
I've written extensively on the mailing list about AR4SI, and I don't think we're done yet. I just wanted to, and I don't think we will finish today. I just wanted to have this open discussion about the framing here.
Exactly.
Okay, and that's fair.
So, and I have to say again, what I just said is independent of the assumptions on that slide. All these are acceptable. What I'm saying is that the decision made by someone is located at a very well-defined, not abstract, not vague, but very well-defined role in the architecture, and that is the verifier. If your policy says all of this is okay, it says, and if you don't agree with that, that I think is the problem. So that is the problem we have to discuss here, because
Yeah.
the verifier will tell you pure HW, everything. That's a policy decision, and the policy decision maker here in this architecture is the verifier. The relying party then can make sense of the assessment, the result that is created by the verifier. That's fine. And then,
I just want to point out policy is you can define the expectations, but defining policy is out of scope.
Yes,
for
and
this
that is the miracle occurs that Hannes said, because some people define something, we don't express how, but it's enforced by a single role in the architecture that is very well defined and not ambiguous and not abstract, and that is a verifier. And if you are contesting that I think has to be very spelled out, because the architecture is done at the moment. If you didn't agree with this in the last 5 years, that is a little bit curious.
So let me explain
Okay.
my comment on that.
Sure.
I just want to recognize Brendan is also in the queue. So go ahead,
Okay.
Lawrence, and then we'll let Brendan.
So
go.
here's my example. I'm clearing I'm a bank clearing a $100,000 transaction. I want it to be done with something that's common criteria certified. I'm a bank clearing a 50-cent transaction. I really don't care if it's an Android app. So as the relying party, the bank in this case, is deciding something about security level, and they're deciding it in the context of the transaction. So the verifier, I don't see the verifier as doing things like deciding whether a transaction is good, because we don't want the verifier involved in the transaction amounts or who the people are or what country they're in or anything like that. The verifier is about verifying the hardware and the software and the device. It's not about application specific stuff. So I think we will have verifiers that are just about sorting out Android apps, one Android app from another. And we will have verifiers that are about sorting out secure elements, one from another. We will have verifiers that can sort out Android apps from that. So the verifier has a role, a big role, a super important role, a critical role, but so does the relying party. So it's not the job of the verifier to make the final decision. It's the relying party that makes the final decision. And they are the end user and consumer of attestation. So we have to serve them.
Okay,
Can I
let's
jump in?
recognize Brendan. Go ahead, Brendan. You've been patiently waiting. Sorry.
Hi.
Eric.
So So this took me a while to wrap my head around, and I went through the same cycle that I think you're going through. So maybe I can offer my insight on how this all fits together. I was looking at this from a firmware attestation point of view and a firmware update point of view. And when I first approached this, the RATS architecture, I was thinking about it in terms of an entity that needs to verify which firmware is running on a device, and a separate entity that says that the report it gets back from a device is trustworthy. Now, that to me looked like two separate roles, one a relying party and one verifier, but I have finally got it through my head that this is in fact three entities. You have two verifiers and a relying party. So what you have is a verifier who says, yes, this result is trustworthy, a separate verifier that says, yes, indeed, this is the version of firmware that it should be running. And finally, you have the relying party that says, okay, both of these guys said it's okay, so now I believe you.
Yeah, good. Sounds good.
So I think what you're looking at is exactly that same hierarchy. You've got your bank that has multiple verifiers, one of which has the role of selecting which other verifier to trust.
Eric?
Can I jump in? Yes.
Yeah.
I want to violently agree with Brendan and Lawrence. We've had this discussion. Please listen. And I'm saying this respectfully because Dave Thaler did educate us before during the architecture that the verifier is embedded in the relying party. It's actually not something pretty about the architecture, but you have to talk about attestation results as coming to a relying party, even if they're co-resident. It is not attestation results just because it's sent over to the same physical device it's the relying party.
Diego?
Okay, this is Diego speaking again. I remember in the good old days when we were dealing with identity federations in academic space, we ended up talking about something, I mean, the different usages of the identities and the quality of the attributes and the sources of these attributes, etc. And people ended up with the concept of a level of assurance. That is what you want to verify depending on the transaction, whether we're talking about $100,000 or we're talking about 2 cents. Just a suggestion that might be that precisely when going about which elements in the architecture could do what and which kind of token could be useful or used, or the several steps of verification might be that now that we are with the charter, someone could write a draft on level of assurance and how to express them.
I would say that the DLOA's claim is kind of, because that gets the certification, and the DLOA's claim actually is in that direction.
Hi, this is Hannes. Yeah, similar to Lawrence, and I think Eric also repeated that as well as Brendan. I think we, despite the initial differences, I think we actually talk about the same stuff and have the same view. I've witnessed the same debates in FIDO with regards to these sort of like multi-stage decision-making processes. The question then is that really documented well in the architecture document, which I hadn't had now time to check, and maybe it is. But maybe that's where the area where the disconnect is.
Right.
And there's the idealization that there's one single party, the verifier, somewhere totally separate from the others that making the decision. And then there's the relying party who just eats whatever it's being served. And what I hear is it's actually more nuanced than that.
Well, if I recall, it is documented in the architecture. The question is based on the interpretation. So again, right?
Yeah, I think the architecture has compound attesters.
Exactly.
Described in detail. It does not have compound verifiers.
It has the concept of collapsing roles on entities.
It just that, but that's different maybe from a composite. That's different from a composite verifier, I think.
Actually, the composite verifier is a co-located verifier And you can
Four
co-locate
level-
verifiers and
four
verifiers
levels?
with other things.
Four levels?
So there has been extreme pushback in the last 2 years on being more precise on that. That is why we just boiled it down to a generic composition capability, which has the obvious choice of co-locating verifier roles with the relying party roles. And it by no account ever says you can just have one verifier. Because there were some, I would say, there was some pushback on the. I plead the fifth. just check this. Sorry.
Maybe you know. But this is Hannes again. I think there's a difference between combining roles into a single entity versus what we have been just talking about, where there's a multi-stage decision process. Or kind of call it nested, call it sequential, or I don't know. I think there's.
I mean, I'm sensing some discomfort and I'm trying to figure out where the clarification needs to lie, because we debated some of this during the architecture. Hank, one conversation, please. And I thought we were steering towards the A4 RSI draft. But from the abstract, I guess I'm looking at Hannes, right? I thought some of this had been articulated, perhaps not well. I'm looking at you in the architecture draft or interpretation, right?
I mean, I would say for me, relying party policy takes into account the application and the domain specific stuff, like am I letting this thing on the network? What's the transaction mat? Am I verifying a fingerprint or something like that? The verifier policy is all about device integrity and device trustworthiness. So that's where how I pull them apart. One is application specific, and one is really the domain of verifying the device.
Nancy, I was merely sitting here and trying to make sense out of the discussions, reading through some of the emails and trying to understand, like, where's the disconnect? And that's sort of my, from that discussion and from some of the list discussions I had read, maybe that is the disconnect, but I would have to reread the document to confirm. I don't know, maybe it's somewhat completely different.
Okay, thanks.
All right, how much time do we got left?
Couple minutes.
Okay, let
we
me
can give you a few more minutes.
Let me hit a couple more of the slides. But appreciate the discussion. Next slide, please. So I wanted to make this comment. I mean, at least the way I've been thinking about the interaction between the verifier and the relying party is it's mostly a sort of a back-end B2B kind of interaction. And I think maybe some of you don't have some other ideas about that, but if it is basically, or at least I think the B2B use case is a big one. It's one that needs to be addressed, that we need to really be cognizant of. So in that case, I would say, and my understanding is JSON plus TLS is what everybody does for B2B. So in terms of that interaction, we should just go with that and let the IT guys that have been doing that stuff for a long time just handle that kind of thing. So we don't need to worry too much about the security of that. But I'm not trying to say we have to write a standard for this or go into a lot of detail. I just want to be, I think, in fact, I guess what I'm saying, we probably shouldn't write a standard for too much of this. Next slide. Okay, I don't think we're going to have much time to get into identity here. I don't think, but I think there's some discussion. I don't think we have enough time to complete this, but I'll say a few things here. I'm starting. My understanding of device identity, I don't think we have a definition of it. Actually, I don't. Maybe in TCG they have one, but I haven't seen one, and I'm not sure what people mean when they say device identity. For me, device identity actually had a lot to do with telling the relying party the serial number, the OEM, the model number, and the version. I mean, that's what was in the original EAT draft, EAT 00, as adopted by this working group. That EAT draft, there was no verifier in there. All the claims went to the relying party. That was the conception. And that was adopted by this working group. And in that form, before the separation was really set there. So seems to me lots of people want to know serial number, OEM, model, and version of devices. I mean, verifiers want to know it, and relying parties want to know it. So it's like a good place to do some work.
Hannes, the term identity is misleading. What if you replace it by identifier, then you see that there are different communities or different industries have different ways to identify things they care about. The cellular industry has other identifiers that they care about that's on a device that has a SIM card versus someone who has an enterprise equipment. And so that's why it has been impossible so far to come up with a fixed number or a small set of identifier types to have a good way to identify these different components that people care about. That's why there's a long list of them. And like I can, of course, provide you a long list of things that people use to identify the aspects, like from the cellular world and from other sectors. It's just a long laundry list. So better make it extensible. It's uneventful, unfortunately.
So look at the UEID definition. It is an attempt to unify them. It does bring into account the cellular industry, and it doesn't bring into account IEEE based identification and all that. So it is, and
I've
it is,
seen
and it
in
is.
the IETF some attempts to basically take all the identifiers people are aware of and munch it into some new identifier format. And
so
maybe that's
UEID is an attempt at that. If you think there's a problem with it, then then let's be specific about what the problem is.
So, I'm hijacking. Hi, this is Hank. This topic. So to take up the identifier in contrast to identity argument, I'm absolutely with Hannes. In the quorum work, we provide an extensive list of identifiers to identify the testing environment, explaining it to the verifier, because it's a reference integrity manifest. It's like the endorsement and stuff and the reference values. And you have to understand what a testing environment is actually supposed to give you evidence about which target environment. That's very important for the appraisal process, because if something else is doing that, it might be the wrong source. So as a verifier, you have to understand which thing in the thing is giving you the assertions about it. So that's what quorum is effectively all about. That's like an extensible list of methods how to identify a testing environment, and there can multiple of them in an attester. I think that actually is the identifier thing from Hannes. So that's the first thing I want to say. And also I want to hijack this time to come back to the multiple verifier thing. I said I will not touch the architecture again, but if we want to say there can be multiple verifiers or multiple entities processing the evidence from an attester, that's something I'm willing to put in. That's a very small statement about how the verifier role works. I think it would address all the problems that we just said. It could be a few sentences, and I would be okay with it, working that out live here on the site and then on the list and everybody. So
it's not a critical need for me. But more, yeah.
I'm happy with just putting that in.
So just to point out on the architecture, we had lots of conversation about the difference between roles and entities that host those roles, and the idea was that roles could be spread across multiple entities, or multiple entities could implement the same role.
So sorry to go back there, but I think there should be some discussion back and forth between, on identity, in particularly, I mean, if you can't use UEID for your identification use case, then let's talk about why and what's wrong with it. specific comments on that. I would really appreciate that. Okay.
So looked at the definition that you defined for UEID, and it has three types: a random number, the IEEE EUI, and the EMI. And what about we used UUIDs?
So
What-
hash the UUID and turn it in and make it random, and then it's random.
You would stuff it into a random number?
That's what it is, isn't it?
No, not necessarily.
It's like there are different types of UIDs. One is, for example, to create the hash, the domain name, and so on. So there are different types. There's like.
So that's the detailed discussion, but please, probably don't have time for right now. But I think that's yeah. So I think I had one more slide. Okay. So I'm probably running out of time. So there's text in a pull request that I mentioned on the mailing list. I'm now calling them sort of verified forwarded claims rather than pass-through to clarify that you can take a claim that came from the attester, forward it to the verifier can take the claim that came from the attester and forward it to the relying party, but that is subject to the policy of the verifier, and the relying party needs to know what that policy is. So it's not just a blind pass-through, it is subject to the verifier policy that the relying party should know. And I'm hoping that resolves that question. Next. Okay, then, so this maybe is still kind of a question of what verifier does what and how you think about it. But I mean, to me, there's some verifiers. Verifiers are not application specific. They're about the device. Some verifiers say the devices are good or bad in a very simple way. You know, thumbs up, thumbs down. I think in some cases, there's machine learning risk engines, and they want to combine application-specific things like the transaction amount, the user account, the spending history, and all that with knowledge about the device. So, you know, they could be very complicated things that they don't want to know, have the job of verifying all the details about the devices. So what they want is the RATS verifier to provide them a lot of validated information about the device, but not transaction-specific information about the device. So I see the range here of in attestation results as from very simple, yes, no, all the way to just check the signature, know that you're getting validated stuff, and pass or forward all the stuff you know on, maybe even add some other stuff. So to me, it's a very big, very large range of what can happen in attestation results. Okay, I think that was it. Let me see if there's one more.
Nope, that was it.
Okay, I think we're out of time, right?
Well,
We're
we did
into the
give you
open
more
mic time
Yeah.
at this point.
We figured we just had open mic,
Okay,
so that's it.
okay. So,
You want to chair
Yeah.
the second session?
no. So maybe maybe we could have a little more discussion about what happens. I mean, to me, the big conceptual thing here is that merging is that a verifier, when in the RATS context, its job is to do things that have to do with device integrity, authenticity, measurements, characteristics about the device, because RATS and attestation is about the device. So a RATS verifier is about the device. It doesn't, the relying party implements their policy, and that's when they bring in to the application specific thing, like what are you trying to do? What's the device trying to do? Play content, you know, give you a measurement that you're going to look at, clear a financial transaction. So that's the relying party policy. So that's really where I pull apart what's going on the verifier and what's going on in the relying party. And therefore that kind of frames up what's going on in attestation results.
Folks in the queue, I don't know if you pay attention. I guess so.
Hey, Gary. Although, hold on a sec. Hank was actually up before Giddy.
I don't know.
No? Okay. Giddy, you're up on the queue.
We can't hear you yet.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah. So on the subject of pass-through claims, I'm speaking selfishly as an EAT editor, and I really don't want to see us getting bogged down in how a verifier would actually interpret a claim that is presented as evidence before it can be sent as an attestation. In the document, I think Lawrence has actually covered it pretty well on that last slide. There's a large gamut of what would be required, particularly in multi-stage verifiers, for how a verifier would interpret evidence against an appraisal policy before relaying it as a pass-through claim. The other thing too is when this discussion started in the working group, I looked at the RIV document, which I figured was the working group, was a sufficient working group, it met the working group criteria for a finished standard as far as attestation evidence, conveyance and attestation results. And it is specifically not prescriptive on how evidence is conveyed as results. And I think, I'm not going to speak for the RIV editors, but I believe that that's actually a good thing. Because I would imagine even from a TPM, results can be interpreted and processed in a multi-stage manner, just like similar to what Lawrence has mentioned on the last slide. So that's my comment. I'm not expecting any response to that.
So this is Hank. So what I heard is two items here that would be basically addressing the overall thing. You could argue that the verifier has a policy that allows to take evidence values and their claim semantics and put them into attestation results, but the relating party should be very well aware that this policy exists and it was applied. And then the second thing I heard was it's actually totally fine with the architecture to have multiple verifier roles. One of them is co-residing on the relying party, so it can actually receive evidence without any confusion and further ado, and do the appraisal process of evidence on the relying party entity, and then pass it through the relying party role that's existing on the relying party. I think that is more clear, because now with this solution, the entity that is the relying party could also consume reference values and endorsements, which a relying party cannot. And so I think the idea that I think Hannes was going to, that we can have finer nuances on where the multi-verifier things happens, is the better solution, because then evidence can be passed on. That's unambiguous. And at the end, the relying party makes sense of it and its entity that it is. So I think I'm smallly leaning towards the multiple verifier thing, except instead of the policy that is kind of purposing the values without, and then you have to understand it and might not be clear. But that's just me for now. This is a discussion, so let's do this discussion offline.
Okay, we've only got 2 minutes left. So Eric and Dave, I'm going to cut the queue at Dave. Eric, if you can make it quick.
I'll make it quick. If you look at the architecture document, relying party, the term appears 125 times. Relying party device 0. So relying party is a role, not a physical item. That's it.
Yeah, okay, great.
Well,
Thanks,
it's
Eric.
important.
Okay, Dave, you're last.
Hey, yep, Dave Taylor. Just want to say, first of all, that I really liked Lawrence's description of a bunch of the topics there. So thank you, Lawrence. For example, the pass-through slide. I really like that way of framing stuff. So nicely done. I guess my question is, is the term pass-through in any document. I couldn't find it in either EAT or AR4SI or anything. It's a useful word to use because I think that's the term that I'd like to update the TEEP protocol spec to be, or TEEP architecture. I think it's the protocol spec to be able to use that same term and reference a document that discusses it so that TEEP doesn't have to. But I think it's exactly right. So.
Yeah, 10
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah, quick comment. The PR to address this doesn't use the term pass-through. It kind of says verified and forwarded and verified because pass-through was generating some reactions. But there is some text in a PR that's to talk about this, and you can sort out the terminology.
A PR
there.
on which spec?
On EAT.
Okay,
It's all
great,
on
great.
171.
Yeah. Okay, so then I will check that and I will update the TEEP protocol spec to use the same words and refer it as soon as the pull request is merged. So thanks, Lawrence.
All right, with that, we managed to be 30 seconds over. So we are going to convene again, is it tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, so we'll convene again tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for those who attended virtually. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow as well. Perfect is the enemy of good. That's Brendan.
So on this charter, do I want to move this text?
Yeah.
We'll vote on that.
Yeah.
Agree that that's.
I would actually put strong touch on because he is existing. Yeah, strong suffering. To use existing.
That should frighten you.
Well, this might sort of smooth it.
So I don't, you probably don't.
We don't have an open discussion.